We're in a series called What Do I Do When I've Drifted Away from God? And so we're talking about these times in our life when we feel like God isn't as close as he once was. And we're learning from the life of Peter. Peter spiritually drifts in several different phases of his life, but there's this one time in his life where it seems like every time he turns around, he ends up taking 2 more steps away from God because of choices and decisions that he had made. And so we're trying to look at some possible reasons of why we might have drifted. We're looking at Peter, hoping we can learn some life lessons that we can apply to our own lives. And so we've looked at 4 so far, just in way of review. The first thing we said is we might have drifted if we've become spiritually proud. It's becoming overconfident, being able to live the Christian life with our own abilities and our own strength. We're kind of riding high in the saddle. When we do that, there's always a good chance we're going to be either thrown off or shot off our horse. And that happened to Peter. He got very confident, very cocky, and he took a fall. Second reason that we might drift is because we become comfortable where we are in our walk with God. We lie back, we play it cool, and chances are when we do that, we're going to fall asleep at the wheel. A third possible reason that we might have drifted from God is because we are concerned about what others may think. And there's this fear that we have of what people might say about us, how they might act toward us, what they might think of us. And so we pull back. We're quiet about our faith. We have a fear about what it might cost us to be identified with Jesus. And then last week we looked at a 4th reason that we might drift. And we will drift if we're distracted by the things of this world. We said that when we focus on the world and the things of this world, we will spiritually drift south. Now, just a reminder, what we said also last week in regards to this is this, that there is nothing wrong with being successful. There is nothing wrong with developing and using your gifts and your abilities to do well and to make good money. There's nothing wrong with doing well. There's nothing wrong with having good things. But the problem is keeping that in check and keeping it in proper perspective. And one of the things we wanted to make clear also last week is we're not just talking about money and the things that money can buy. There's a lot of different things that are good things that this world offers us that can get to the point that they become more important than God. And we made a list of them. Fame, image, reputation, a significant other, pleasure, popularity, position, power, stuff, success, things. All things that are neutral unless we make them more important and give them more importance than they should have. We said that there's this tendency that we have to see something and then want it. And then it goes from a want, we convince ourselves that it's a need. And then once it becomes a need, we've got to have it. And sometimes we're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. It goes from being a want to consuming us, and all too often we let it define us, and then it distracts us from what's most important. Because one day they're going to stick you in a hole, okay? Or maybe they'll just spread your ashes across the stadium in Nebraska. I know somebody had that done. Or like another friend of mine, he loved the ocean, and so every time they went to the ocean, they threw a little bit of Jack back in the box, and that's where he went from being Jack to fish food. And what I'm saying is, when it comes down to this life, sooner or later, the one thing you can depend upon is you're going to die, okay? Well, not if Jesus comes back. Okay, if Jesus comes back, we have this thing called the rapture. I don't even want to go there. But that could happen. Figure it out. And so if you let this world and you live for this world and it comes down to it and you have this nice house and you die, somebody else is going to be living in your house, okay? If you die and you have this big financial portfolio, somebody else is going to spend your money. Okay, if you have this hot car and you be driving around feeling good about yourself, it's either going to end up in the garbage heap or somebody else is going to be having the keys when they stick you in the ground. And the problem is we tend to define our life way too often between, we talk about this often here, 2 dots. The cradle and the coffin. Okay? The day you're born and the day you're buried. And so you only live once, go for the gusto, okay? That kind of attitude, with the bottom line, when they stick you in the hole, only 3 things are going to matter. Faith, family, and friends. And those are the things that we should focus on. But when we get consumed by the things of this world, and the things between the 2 dots, we get distracted from those three very important things. Now, last week we focused in on and zeroed in on a scene out of the life of Peter. It's part of the Easter story. They've come into Jerusalem. They had this thing called the triumphant entry. These really cool things are happening. The crowd's there. It's like it's a big parade. It's all because of Jesus. You got the disciples, and they're all that. Yeah, we're with him. He's with us. You know, they're doing this thing. They're strutting. It's looking pretty good. But the thing kind of goes down. This thing called the Last Supper, and then everything begins to go south. And what happens is Jesus takes three people he knows that has his back and will pray with him. And they go to the garden, and while he's in the garden, Jesus gets arrested. And while he is there, some things take place. They tie his hands together. He's surrounded by Roman soldiers as well as some important religious leaders and a few wannabes who are following the lights. We said, you know how it is. Some people, they see a fire truck or the ambulance, they follow the lights. They want to go see what's going down. And so there's probably some of those folks there as well. It's at night. They don't have bright lights, but they do have torches. So they've got Jesus arrested. And when he's arrested, the disciples split. So Jesus is all by himself with this crowd. They turn around and head him into Jerusalem. He's going to go to Pilate, and well, first the high priest, then Pilate, back to the high priest, then back to Pilate, and then to the cross. Jesus had said just minutes, maybe an hour or two earlier, he told the disciples, one of you is going to betray me. That person did. He said, all of you will desert me, and all of them did. So we said last couple weeks, that Jesus was alone, kind of. We said kind of because when this went down they all hit the fan, the disciples turned tail and ran for the hills. It was every man for himself, and they split. And Peter initially was one of those disciples who took off, and he just goes running, and somewhere along the way he didn't get very far, he comes to a stop, puts his hands on his hips and said, what am I doing? What's going to happen to Jesus? And we know that he is the only disciple who goes back. Now, we say he went back, he kept distance. Albeit he played it safe, but we say, gotta give him credit because he went back. He had to see what's going to happen to Jesus. So, they get back to Jerusalem. They're kind of like in the market square. There's soldiers there. There's civilians. There's people who are in the square at night. There's a fire in the middle of the square. Some people are just chatting, shooting the bull around the fire. There's just a mixing, a gathering, an eclectic group of people. Jesus is off to the side. You can pitch him a little bit away from the fire. There's a couple of soldiers watching to make sure he didn't try to take off or nobody tries to come again. But the rest of the guards are just kind of talking amongst themselves and walking around with the civilians in the mix. It's cold. There's a nip in the air. Kind of like last night. I don't know about you guys outside. I went over to see my neighbors. Most of them either had a sweater, a light sweater, or a jacket on in July. It's insane. But there was a nip in the air, and after a while, now Peter's in a distance, but now he's in Jerusalem. He's kept his distance so they don't recognize him. He's kept his distance so they don't think he's one of the guys who have come back. He doesn't want to be recognized. He's laying low key, kind of incognito. And after a while, Peter wanders over and begins to warm himself by the fire. And as we said last week, here's Peter, one of Jesus' 12, one of Jesus' inner circle of 3, and here he is hanging with the enemy. He is with the crowd, he's with the soldiers, and Jesus is over there. There's a line been drawn in the sand, and Peter's on the wrong side of it. There's something wrong with this picture. And as we asked last week, we said, what happened? How does Peter go just an hour, 2 or 3 hours earlier, at the Last Supper? Jesus makes this statement that one of you is going to betray me, and Peter's all over it. Nobody's going to do that. You're all going to desert me? He says, no, I'm not going to do that. Jesus says, don't be so sure. He makes it clear that these guys might desert you, but not me. These guys might be chumps, but I'm your champion. These guys might turn and walk, but I've got your back. Even if I have to die for you is the line that he will bite on real soon. I will not desert you. So how does he go making these grandiose statements just a couple hours earlier to this point now where he is laying low and with the very people who just arrested Jesus? Now, For the next few minutes, here's what I want you to do. I want to put this kind of in the first person, and if I don't do that well, I want you to do it. Because I want you to have the opportunity to interact with some questions that Peter needed to ask, but that we need to ask ourselves. When Jesus was at the Last Supper and he said, one of you will betray me, an interesting thing happens. There's this initial response, no, I wouldn't do it. But there's also this other initial response on the heels of that, where every disciple looks at Jesus and says, is it I? There's this confidence it won't be me, but there's also this realization that it could be me. So as I ask these questions, I don't want you to turn to the person who said, that's you. I want you to be saying, is it me? Okay? Because we have that tendency to do that. Could this be me? And if it is, I want you to own it. Okay? So here's the last reason of why we might have found ourselves to drift. And I want you to know, I so get this point. I so get this point. And as I said last week, for those of you who came back to maybe, hey, we get to see Greg's dirty laundry. I said last week, my 3 years, this last 3 years, I've been wrestling with God in this one, because this is mine. Okay? But I got a feeling I'm not alone. But here's the question I want you to ask before I tell you what that is. What do you do when life happens? What do you do when life happens? Well, you've seen the hat. Doesn't quite say life happens, but you've seen the hat. There's actually a word for that word. It's called skubalon. It's in the Greek. It's actually in the Bible. All right. I want to get a hat that says skubalon happens. So what's that? If you don't know, you'll find out. So I'm going to show this movie clip for a sec, and I want you to know before we press this thing, this is from a Christian movie called Signs. Sorry. If you're not from here, I always call movies called Christian movies. But it features Mel Gibson. It's a little bit out there. But this scene is poignant. What do you do when life happens? Let's show that. And this sounds not great. I apologize. You want to hit the lights for me too there, Kim, when you get that going? It's a great clip. Fast moving. I'm going to be bummed.
They stopped, slowed down the road, and hit the cutting into the tree, and she was pinned between it.
What does that mean?
The truck is there most of our head.
What did you say?
She won't be saved. Her body is pinned in such a way that it's alive when it should be alive. And the truck is holding together. And she doesn't feel much, and she's talking almost like normal. And we didn't pull the truck out because we want you to come down here and be with her as long as she's awake. And I won't be very long. Now, Father, do you understand what I told you?
Carolyn, this is the last time I'm going to talk with my wife.
Yes, it is.
think maybe this is really playing the emotional trump card. I apologize for that if that's how you feel, because that's not the point. The point is, I've been in ministry long enough where I've been in some of these kind of situations where out of the blue something happens and a tragedy has occurred and nothing is ever going to be the same again. And I've been in there when they're going through the motions of CPR, but the person's already gone, and had the responsibility to tell the family that they're not going to make it. So I've been at moments like this, and just so you know, I sob like a baby. Because I value people and I value relationships. Sometimes I've known the people involved. I'm a mess. And I want you to think about what you do when life happens. This crappy stuff that marks us that we never forget. Because that's where I want to go with this next point. And here's the next point. Another possible reason we might have drifted is this. We are disappointed with God. I would even go so far as say, we're not just disappointed, we are mad at God. If you have not been there, I'm thankful you haven't, but it will come your way. So here's Peter standing by the fire, and I want to go back to that scene because I want you to see how this applies to Peter. He is emotionally spent. Remember, he was supposed to pray with Jesus. It's been a long day. It was the Last Supper. We can't even really grasp it, but it's kind of like Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, our birthday, and 50th anniversary all wrapped up into one. It's a big ta-da if you're a Jew. Because you're celebrating God's goodness to you as a people and how He, in a miraculous way, rescued your people from captivity in Egypt and took you on that long journey to the Promised Land. That includes the 10 plagues, and let my people go, and the pillar of cloud, smoke during the day, and the pillar of fire at night. We just found God intervening in a significant way for His people, so mightily that they never forgot it. Generations have passed, had come and gone, but they still celebrate God's choosing of them as a people. It's a big thing. And Peter has had just had it that night. They had this wonderful but weird meal with Jesus. They went to the garden. Peter and his two other associates, it was Peter, Andrew, and John, or James, Peter, Andrew, and John, and one of them, they fall asleep, and they're exhausted. It's been a really long day. It's been a long, long week, and it's even been a longer 3 years. But the last few hours have been very confusing. Peter is both confused and disappointed, and when you have life happen to you, you're also numb. There's no word for it. So think about Peter for a second. Peter is a simple fisherman, and he's not really good at it. Okay, he's blue collar, which means there's little hope, especially in his culture today, for there to be any upward mobility or promotion. His economic status and social standing are really very low and average, with zero chance of that ever changing because, again, of the culture. He is not well educated. How bad is it? He refers to the 3rd grade as his senior year. This guy is not the sharpest crayon in the box. Okay? He is on shore and with his family. It's a family business, and they're cleaning the nets after a day out on sea. And Jesus comes by, and they know who He is. They might have heard Him speak. The word is on the street. This guy is amazing. He's a prophet. Some thinks he's a prophet of old, risen again. He's doing miracles. The crowd's thronging around Him, not just to see what He can do as far as miracles, but to hear His teaching because it's pretty profound. And in that day, somebody who was a teacher, a rabbi, would call people that he thought were worthy to become his disciple. And it's called a Talmud. And the purpose of a Talmud was, I'm a rabbi and I'm going to teach you, and what I have learned and acquired and the wisdom I've gained, it will carry on for generations, because I'll choose somebody to take what I have taught and learned and teach it to the next generation. And they only choose the best and the brightest. And so to be a disciple is usually determined at a younger age. Peter Peter didn't make the 4th grade, okay? He didn't even get right in these levels, and that's where he was at. I want to be a doctor. Yeah, that's nice, okay? Very good for you. Maybe you'll be lucky and you'll see one once, but it's not going to happen, all right? Have you thought about selling Amway? And, sorry, just joking. And, probably got 6 Amway, be weird. So, he's missed his opportunity. It's not going to happen. But Jesus comes by and says to he and his brother Andrew, come follow me. And out of the blue, this incredible rabbi says, I want you to be my disciple. That was just off the charts. And it says there in Matthew 4, at once. Another translation says immediately. They dropped their nets and followed Jesus. So I want you to understand, Peter gave up everything to follow Jesus. He left his family. He left the family business. That might not sound big to you. But in that culture, family businesses are passed on from one generation to the next. And so whatever your dad did, 80-90% chance that's what you're going to do. And when 2 brothers leave a boat, that's a problem. You ever watched Deadliest Catch? Yeah. They have a guy go down, it's catastrophic. They got to ship somebody in and have them flown in because it's a big deal. 2 brothers leave the family business. You don't think that caused problems at the family reunion? You don't think Dad was a little bit teed? You at least could have put your nets away, okay? They dropped and went. They left their family for a time, okay? Well, at least the wife could sing that old country song, How Can I Miss You If You Won't Go Away? Now she can sing. And he's left his closest friends, he's left his community, left everything. They are all in for Jesus for 3 years. It's been a world tour, a whirlwind tour. It's been amazing. Jesus did these miracles. He spoke. He did these incredible things. You wouldn't believe. Walked on water, raised the dead, healed the blind, made the mute talk, healed diseases, calmed the storm, turned the water into wine. So righteous, a good bread. You know it was. And all these things. But this week has been particularly big because now they come to Jerusalem, the centerpiece, the Mecca of the Jewish people. And they came in and there was a parade and crowds and cheering. And I want you to know, you would say, so what? So I want you to stand. They gave up everything to be with Jesus, to be a disciple. And it looks like their investment is about to pay some dividends. They've been building momentum. There's been a large gathering, and now they have a following, the plethora of amazing miracles, the profound teaching, winning debates against the culture's brightest and best, whether they be a teacher, a rabbi, or a politician. Everything seems to be coming together for Jesus to lead his people out of bondage again. So I want you to say that for the Hebrew nation, they've been promised a Messiah. And this Messiah would come and get, the thinking was, he's going to be a political Messiah. And he's going to restore to Israel them as a world power, as a people with honor, as a people belonging to God, set apart. So that's their mentality. And Jesus seems to be having all the things, they didn't see the miracle piece coming. The profound teaching was kind of surprising too. But he had this ability to gather people from every avenue and every facet of life. So there's this coming together, and the nation's coming together, and they think this might be it. So all of a sudden, though, on this particular day, Jesus got off his meds. All of a sudden, he's talking a little crazy. He's saying things like, I'm going to be killed, I'm going to be crucified, and somebody's going to betray me, and you're going to desert me, and now he said things along the way that were like that, but this is different. There's a weird feeling that something bad's going down, and then he gets arrested. He gets arrested. Jesus has been messing with the wrong people. He's been taking pot shots and liners to the chin of the religious leaders. And he's been being looked at by the Roman Empire with tedious scrutiny. And now he has now it's a double-edged sword. Not only has he crossed the people and positioned in power with his own people, but he's also got into the mix the Roman Empire. Things are looking very, very precarious. And they've staggered. And so, Peter's numb. He didn't see this coming. And Jesus could have played this so differently. I mean, he has this power. We've seen him do different things. I mean, he could have done this differently, but he didn't even do anything. Like he rolled over and played dead. And this is not what Peter bargained for. This is not what he signed on for. This is not the way that things were supposed to play out. He's not like confused, but he's disappointed. This is not what I expected. So let me ask you, you ever have something come along that absolutely levels you? In that movie, Signs, Mel Gibson plays a minister that in the movie at the beginning is no longer a minister. And they take you to this scene. He's bitter. He no longer believes. He no longer prays. He no longer preaches. He has nothing to do with the church. He's walked away. That's why they called him Father. Because he's an Episcopal priest. They were able to marry. That's his wife who was out for a walk. Got pinned against a tree. She's been severed. So once they pull that truck away, she's going to bleed out. And I can't imagine what something that would be like that. But then again, I've been in situations where it's come down to a matter of minutes. And he's given up on God. In the movie, he's mad at God. You ever been there? I've got a book. Trats, it's in my bag. In fact, can you bring my bag for me there, Ken? It's right there. I knew I'd do that. I want to read a story from a book, and it's a true story. It's right there by the computer. In fact, it's the only book in there. You want to grab it for me? And this is a book called Who Do You Think You Are? It's written by Mark Driscoll. And he tells this story about a pastor. I love to say the word pastor because I got the microphone and I'm the pastor, but sometimes people think we walk on water. If we could, we would, because it'd be totally stinking cool. And then no one had all the problems that Shannon took me bass fishing this week. And we had to go to church 2 or 3 times because I threw my lure up into the reeds. Wouldn't have to do that, just walk right over there and pluck that fish right out. But I want to read this story about a pastor. And life happens to him. All right? His name was Bill. Bill became a Christian at 21. He didn't understand what it really meant. Then now he had to make some changes, like go to church and try to live a better life. As a result, most of his Christian life was spent trying to measure up. Bill said, when I grew up in a home where measuring up meant trying to receive affirmation and attaboys from my dad. Unfortunately, when I became a Christian, I projected my understanding of God as a father based with the father I grew up with. So I continually struggled with the idea that God was pretty much displeased with me most of the time. Ever been there? He goes on to write, Bill's desire to make God proud of him ended up pushing him to do some good things for all the wrong reasons. So in 1994, he left a lucrative full-time position as an engineer to pursue full-time vocational pastoral work. He didn't talk to me, okay? I'm just saying. Looking back, he realized his motives were to impress God, to please God, and to serve God. Bill said, I believe that my identity was in the things I did, not who I was as a Christian. So here's the problem with having your identity, he said, wrapped up in the things you accomplish. Your accomplishments become your God. However, the God of accomplishments only works as long as things go well. When the wheels start to come off, you are left again with nothing but the old familiar image of an angry guy shaking his head in disappointment. In 1996, things went terribly wrong. Bill was diagnosed with Parkinsonism, called progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, with a life expectancy of about 5 years. Bill says, here I was serving God, raising a family, being faithful to my wife. In other words, doing all the right things. But God allowed me to get sick. In 2000, God immediately and miraculously healed Bill of this illness. But Bill still struggled with finding his salvation in his works rather than Jesus. In that same year, God blessed Bill's family with another child. Her name was Annie. And Annie viewed her as God's special blessing and gift in his life. Bill said she was an amazing, loving, graceful child. Her middle name was Grace. She was such a precious little girl. For 3 years, everything was great as Bill pastored at a church and he watched his family grow. Then the unthinkable happened. At age 3, Annie suffered a seizure, resulting from an undiagnosed malady affecting her adrenal glands called Addison's disease. The lack of oxygen from the seizure caused Annie to suffer permanent brain damage. She could no longer talk, walk, or understand most of what was said to her. Additionally, she couldn't eat and had a permanent tube placed in her stomach so she could be pump-fed. Bill said, I could not understand God's purpose in this tragedy. My identity was wrapped up in my identity as a pastor, a husband, and a father. I was devastated. I felt like a hypocrite working as a pastor when I had my own questions about whether God was really good or not. My faith was in the toilet, so I resigned. Everything I built up in an effort to please God, my work, my family was crumbling down around me. Watching my little girl suffer had a devastating effect on her whole family. Annie died at age 7. Bill and his family knew after her seizure that she might not live a long life. And Bill says her life was far too short. We miss her every day, all day. You ever been there? You ever been there? I just wrote a bunch of stuff that I've actually seen and been a part of. You had a biopsy. You prayed that it would be okay, but the tests say you have cancer. Or you find out you have cancer, you pray that it can be treated, and then you find out that it's inoperable. You needed that job, and it didn't come through, and you'd already resigned from the job you had. You prayed for healing, but now she's gone. You prayed that God would protect your children, and you took one. You prayed that your husband would stay, but he left you anyway. It's an addiction. You prayed that you'd get over it, but you can't. It has robbed you of everything that's precious. You tried to quit, you can't. It has your number. And defeat and hopelessness and the guilt of never being able to overcome it define your life and mark your future. You did what was right and it cost you everything. You prayed and God was silent. He seemed distant, indifferent, as if he just walked away. You have deep regrets, choices you made. They changed the trajectory of your life. It was a mistake, you confessed it, but the fallout continues. You served God faithfully, and when you needed it most, He did not come through for you. And you asked for forgiveness, but did God really forgive you, or is this your lot for the rest of your life? Missed opportunity, lost relationship, and a life of mediocrity. I got an email from a good friend of mine who lives in Vegas. Actually, it's in San Diego. And he sent me an email this week. We were chatting on Facebook. He sent me a Facebook chat. And he said, Greg, do you ever wonder why bad things happen to good people? And it made me laugh because I knew this message was coming and we've been actually talking about that theme. And I said, yeah, like about every day. But I said, the thing that bothers me about that line is this, because I read it about 3 or 4 times, but it never really dawned on me. Well, why do bad things happen to good people? And usually the person asking that question is pretty convinced that they're good people. They're also pretty convinced that there's bad people, there's not good in them, who deserve bad to happen to them. And so we got this kind of karma mantra that we really believe that we're pretty good, so we deserve better. That life should never happen to us. That the sun should always shine and the rain only when we want it, just enough to keep things green. That's how we are. I'm that way, anyway. Why is it when I try my best to love God, Have you ever had this? That life gets harder. And sometimes it's disappointing, hopeless, painful, unfulfilling. Have you ever wondered those kind of things? And that's where Peter's at. And I've been there a lot. I was thinking this morning, went out and had a cup of coffee on the back porch, just so beautiful this morning. But I was trying to think when my wrestling with God happened. It was shortly after I met him, to be honest. Because I'm typical. I kind of want what I want when I want it. You know? And it's usually when I get it, the only problem is I always want just a little bit more. You know how that works? And I started thinking about just different junctures, but for me it probably started, and just being honest, I don't want to go into all these stories. I just want to give you the order. We lived in a little town in Minnesota. We loved it there. We thought we would be buried there one day. Then we got a new pastor. Pastors can be such jerks, I know, because I shaved one this morning. Okay? And we got a new pastor. And he was a piece of work. We couldn't stay, so we resigned. When we resigned, the board decided we need you to leave for a bad reason, so that you're the bad guy. So that began a process of them trying to come up and make stuff up for me to have to resign. But I'd already resigned. So then they had to have a reason that I resigned. It was just ugly. It was ugly. 10 years of great ministry, and then we had to leave in an ugly way. And until this day, we're not really welcome back at that church. Okay? We love that church. It's just the way it goes. So that was a really grieving time to move my kids. My kids loved that town, loved their friends. And we were doing what was right, following God's lead. You think that's hard? Because, just so you know, because I'm a pastor, I don't get extra points. It's not like God says, Brad, you're a pastor, so you get 4 more brownie points and a special gift behind door number 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't work that way. Okay, I wish it did. It doesn't. Then we moved to another town in Minnesota. Loved it. 4 years later, we left. And we left on good terms. We love it there. But I planned to die there. We moved to Lincoln, which had always been a dream, but it wasn't a dream when we got called. And that was a devastating effect upon my kids, especially my daughter. My daughter come blue. So, you know, she'd run away at the age of 15. And we would spend our nights searching for her because she was with a rough crowd and she was playing around with things called coke, cocaine, and meth. And we're on the streets. And by the way, out of that pain came RiverTree, to be honest. And that's all part of Lincoln that you don't see when you're out in the south side around the Beamers and Lexuses and nice houses. But watching my daughter drown and not being able to save her. You know what it's like when you get called from the police station because your daughter's been on the run and you can't find her, and they said, actually what happened was it was on the news, and then we called the police station, so we can't tell you because we don't know yet. But your daughter's gone, nobody's seen her, and then there's a news piece that they found a teenage young girl naked, dead in the ditch, and you have to wait 24 hours to find out it's not your kid. Tough day. You don't think I was wrestling with God? No, I was tough. Or the day my son called me and said, Dad, I had an accident. And I was ticked because we'd had a lot of accidents. Like 8 in about 18 months. From fender benders to 3 cars being totaled. And so Jake calls me, Dad, I got in an accident. I unload. Doc, honest, son, $10 for playing with the radio, talking to Josh, not paying attention to you rear-ended somebody. And I'm chewing on him, and then I realize, Jake, hey, Jake. Well, that dog, he didn't have a cell phone. The kid gets on the phone. Is Jake there? Sir, yeah, you should get here. This is really bad. And he gets the accident before the paramedics begin to weep because you're like, there's no way that we didn't lose one of those boys in that accident. Just, I could go on the things that have come normal stuff. This isn't God picking on me. This is not like, you all have had these kind of phone calls and these kind of days. And you wonder, where in the fat jack are you, God? You say you have my back. And what really confuses all that, things like this. Verses like this. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you. And you're looking at your checkbook, you're looking at your car, you're looking at, you know what I'm saying? Hello? That must be a typo. Not to harm you. Read that when you have significant loss. Plans to give you a hope in the future when you don't think you have either. Then it goes on to say, then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You ever pray and feel like the prayers didn't even make it to the ceiling? How about this one? Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or asks for a fish, you'll give him a snake? If you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? How about this? Especially when God seems distant and quiet. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And then Jesus adds these words, I will no longer call you servants, I have called you friends. I've read that verse and thought, Jesus, if you're my friend, who needs enemies? Now I know you're like, you're the pastor, and some of you are like stepping back because you're expecting that crack of lightning just to come down the French fry meat, which would be an amazing story. But to be able to, our pastor said, God, exactly. That would result in some really serious holy living with that. But these kind of questions that we have are questions that have been around since time. Even David said, why, God, do the evil prosper and the righteous suffer? It's been asked forever. And the answer is, I don't know. But here's my answer. I know what some of you want to say, how do we fix that? We'll talk about that next week. But here's the thing I got to tell you. And the thing that's really hard when you're hurting. God can be trusted. God can be trusted. And when life hurts and disappoints and confuses, you don't feel that, you just feel numb. Life has got to be more than just this stretch of time, which is so short between those two dots. If this is all there is, that's not too encouraging, is it? That wouldn't be encouraging for Hunter's family who buried him because he was stillborn. And I held that lifeless child who was beautiful in every way, but the mother never got to take home. Or my friends who buried their son. Or my buddy who lost his wife. Or my other friend who lost a job, and those things seem so trite, but at the time they seem big, don't they? Those little things that we get upset. I got second. I didn't get the car I wanted. I mean, come on. Sometimes we do that, if we even think about that half a second, we realize that was not so bad. But when it's people we love, when it's ache and disappointment, how about a friend of mine who has chronic depression, is on 3 or 4 antidepressants, and wakes up every day just absolutely exhausted and depressed. And they're such a wonderful person, but they're just in such a deep hole. I'm just saying, all of us here have had terrible pain. And some of the pain is legit. Definitely legit. But if this is all there is, I only have one word, but that's despair. That's just despair. But if this is not all there is, and that God is looking at the forever piece of that, where the line goes through to eternity, that this is not what we were made for. We were made for that time one day when we're not here. There's hope in that. And there's hope in that when I screw up between these two dots, God still carries me. There's hope in that. And when I screw up and I shoot myself in both feet, it's my fault. And I got regret. God can even take that and spin it in such a way that it works out to my benefit, not only here, but in the long term. There's hope in that. So the only thing I have for you right now, next week we'll pull it together, is this. God can be trusted. God can be trusted. It's easy to have faith when everything's going your way. It is pretty easy. But when life happens, which it does for all of us, that's when we hold on, even when it hurts. There are some questions we have that we're not going to get answered on this side of eternity, but I believe we'll get clarity on the other side. The hope is that God has your back. When you trust Christ, He doesn't leave you. He is there for you. And by the way, He agrees with you. But it's part of your life. God can be trusted. So my question for you, will you trust Him? You can be honest with Him. I'm honest with Him all the time. I'm really thankful I can be honest with Him, because I get frustrated. We kind of have some knock down, drag out. By the way, He usually wins, but the bottom line is, His shoulders are big enough for you to throw your questions and your doubts and your fears and your anger at Him. And He won't bail. He can be trusted. Let's pray. God, it's a simple message. Just stating a fact. Life happens. But sometimes those of us who have chosen to trust Christ, God, when we do that, we got this weird thing that it's just all going to be good, and it's not. Life has a whole lot of both. And I'm thankful for all the really cool things in life I have, my 11 grandkids, my 4 kids and their wonderful spouses, a tremendous wife, health. I have a lot of things I'm incredibly grateful for. But man, I lose perspective and I bellyache anytime I don't get my way, but especially when life hurts. I don't get it, but I choose to trust you. Help us in our unbelief to believe. Help us in our doubt to trust. And I praise in Christ's name. Amen.